disposition that inclines you to a number of things. People's social attitudes can be scaled in how heritable they are. Again, the assortment is greater on the more heritable. Next item. Blood tests. Well, this isn't a very clear slide, but if you look at the two bars in the middle, they're friends, and bottom line is that best friends and spouses are genetically more similar even when you take blood tests. This study was done about 10 or 15, 20 years ago, and it has a sort of an archaic ring to it now, because of course if we were doing the study today, we'd be taking DNA markers and not blood loci. But the physical evidence is that people are actually at the DNA level more similar to each other. Next item. Okay, so fast forward to today. This is a top journal that, if we go to the next one, that Trudy Bonds and I just published a paper in July of last year on twins. Who do twins marry? If you remember, identical twins are twins that have 100% of their genes in common. Fraternal twins only have 50% of their genes in common. So, do the identical twins choose more similar spouses to each other than the fraternal twins, also choosing spouses who may be similar but less similar than the identical twins? The answer is yes. Do the identical twins choose more similar friends to each other than the fraternal twins? Again, the answer is yes. And everybody in the field of behavior genetics knows that identical twins choose more similar motor cars to drive, or houses to live in, or places to go on vacation, clothing styles, and so on. They're very identical in their preferences. But to find that identical twins are also more similar in their preferences for mates and spouses and best friends is extremely good evidence for the genetic similarity argument. It shows that these dispositions are heritable. And because of Trudy and I did an analysis, we go to the next one. This is just a pie chart, basically separating out genetic variance from different kinds of cultural variance. And what we found in this particular study was that 18% of the variance is genetic for the choice of spouse, and 41% of the variance is genetic for choice of best friends. Now you might say, well, 18% isn't all that great, but in fact 18% of the variance is a big effect. It's much more than a whisper coming out of the genes. And of course it's much bigger for choosing a spouse, choosing a best friend, and I think the reason it's 41% there, almost 50% heritable, your preference for friends. I think the reason is that when you choose a spouse, you're much more constrained. I mean, first of all, the spouse has to want to marry you back and so on. There are just many more constraints on your choices. So it reduces the genetic percentage. But anyway, this is evidence of genetic similarity theory. I think that's nailed down almost. And don't forget that who you marry, when you pick a spouse or pick a best friend, this is not kin. This is totally different from kin selection theory, the old Hamiltonian model. You're not marrying relatives. So we're really expanding this who are you going to be altruistic towards argument. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is a journal called Nations and Nationalism. It's a top journal. It's published by the London School of Economics. And people who publish in there are trying to explain why there's nationalism in different places, why it increases or decreases at different points in time, and so on and so forth. And I think all political scientists have been stunned by the incredible outbreak of ethnic nationalism in Eastern Europe. When the USSR fell, it split all the way along ethnic lines, and old hatreds or new ones just emerged, and antagonisms and conflict. And nobody ever thought this would happen in Europe again. Somehow modernism, capitalism, whatever, had gone beyond that. But we could see that it just fell all back. Why? And so all these different theories are put forward to explain it. Go to the next one. I was very pleased to be able to say that in the lead issue of the last issue had a paper by me explaining or extrapolating the genetic similarity theory argument to try to explain nationalism. That really fellow ethnics are just members of one big family, which is the traditional view of what an ethnic state is. And therefore, families are meant to be altruistic and groups of genes. And one of the things I was able to do was try to explain certain anomalies. For example, in the Middle East, why are there suicide bombers? Why is there so much incredible irrationality and hostility and hatred? Why does Arab movements go from nationalism to fundamentalism, or from fundamentalism up to nationalism, back and forth? And one explanation is that these are just different attempts by gene pools to exert themselves. And if one method doesn't work, then you run into a roadblock. We'll try a different method. So cultures are really just attempts by the underlying genes to express themselves and have their way and keep themselves being replicated. In any case, we go to the next slide. This is a book by Frank Salter, who's a political ethologist at the Max Planck Institute in Munich, although right now he's a visiting professor of political science at Birkbeck College in London. And he has taken this genetic similarity theory viewpoint and extrapolated it to nations and nationalism even more. And if we go to the next slide, this is a complicated slide, and maybe I shouldn't even be putting it up, but the main point I want to get across, and this comes out of Frank Salter's work, is he's taken very well accepted by everybody published data looking at DNA around the world. You know, I have all these theories of who's genetically distant or similar to who and so on, where you can invert that data to actually look at how similar within a nation or within a population are people. And the bottom line goes something like this. If the world was made up only of English people, then one random English person is 0% related to any other English person. There's just no relationship there. It's all mixed up. But if the world suddenly is divided up into English people and Germans, then English people are to themselves 1/32 of a cousin. Any random English person meeting another random English person is 1/32 of a cousin compared to the Germans. As are the Germans 1/32 of a cousin each compared to the English. Well, this now begins to give you a sense, even at that level, of one nation, Germans and English people going to war against each other, because you magnify 1/32 of a cousin by hundreds, tens of thousands, millions of people, my family against your family, then you can get these hatreds, even between groups that are so similar as the English and the Germans. And the rest of the chart takes us even further. And it says, if the world was made up of English people and Middle Easterners, then English people are 3/8 of a cousin randomly to each other compared to a Middle Eastern person. Compared to Indians, they're half cousins. Compared to the Chinese, they're half siblings. So if you're in China and you meet another English person, another white person, you are like meeting a half sibling compared to the Chinese around you. And if you go to Africa and you meet another white person, then you're full siblings. And of course the blacks in America recognize this. They call each other bro and so on. They're brothers. And in fact, genetically,